So we've seen purposes of sentencing that focus on the criminal. We've seen purposes of sentencing that focus on society at large. Now we'll look at a couple that tend to focus more on the people who are closest to the criminal, and that is potential victims. So protection of the public, the view of this purpose of sentencing is really to say, what can we do to make sure that this person doesn't end up attacking or affecting or whatever the people that are closest to him or her. If he's in jail, then he's not on the street and can't harm the outside world. Protection of the public tends to focus on, let's isolate this person from society. And this can be pretty effective while the person is in prison, right? If somebody is guilty of aggravated assault and they're clearly a dangerous person, let's put them in prison for now. They're not going to commit aggravated assault against other members of the public. They might do something to other people in the prison, but generally we would be less worried about that than we are about their effects on the outside world. However, the disadvantage of saying, well, criminals, the great problem with them is just put them in jail. It's very, very expensive to put people in jail. It essentially costs about the same to keep a person in jail as one person is likely to earn outside working. And so there are real problems of scale once you start putting people in prison all the time. It can also be the case that putting people in prison, the other people they're going to end up associating with in prison tend to be people who are as dangerous or more dangerous than themselves, and they can feed off each other, right? If you put somebody in prison, then they may end up coming out much more dangerous upon release than when they went in. So unless you want to keep them in jail forever and you're going to release them at some point, you may actually be making it more dangerous for the public by keeping them in prison for a very long time, unless you keep them in prison for the rest of their lives, right? So unless we're ready to accept just locking people up in perpetuity for minor crimes, then putting them in jail can often generate more danger for the public than if you came up with some other solution. If we want to focus not just on potential victims, but on actual victims, then you start looking at the purpose of sentencing that is reparation. Reparation is saying, okay, think of crime as, sort of along the civil law lines where you say, all right, you've caused an injury. So reparation says, whatever injury has been caused, let's try and undo that injury. As much as possible, we should try and find a way for the criminal to fix the harm they've done, either through working it off somehow, like if you've broken a window for some merchant, right, that's a crime, and maybe you can be ordered to do some work for that person by a judge, which can happen, especially with young people. You may be asked to give a donation or to provide community service. You may be asked to write an apology. A lot of these tend to be things that for younger offenders you will see more often as things ordered by a judge. So, good thing about reparation as a focus of sentencing is that it looks towards the victim and healing, right? These are the people we want to be protecting. These are the things we want to be undone. However, a problem with this, and this is maybe more something that civil law lawyers would be more interested in, is that it tends to bleed into civil cases, right? There are specific ways, like if you're the victim of a crime, you can always sue the person who committed the crime. This is something that people don't always think of too often, because often the people who tend to commit crimes tend not to have a lot of money, so it's not really worth suing them for any sustained reason. But once you start focusing on reparation in criminal law, you tend to bleed over into the sort of analysis that makes more sense in civil cases. You might start to suspect that the victims, that the witnesses in the crime are playing things up if they think they might be able to get some money out of it. So you kind of want to keep an eye on that. It's also dangerous in that the severity of the crime is measured in the effect of the crime rather than the intent of the crime. You might say, let's let the civil law focus on the effect of the crime, and criminal law's purpose. Criminal law is really about punishment, and if the intent wasn't that severe, then maybe the crime's sentencing shouldn't be that severe either. Allow the person to be suable. Maybe the victim can try and get some money back through the courts, through suing the person. But as far as punishment goes, which is what criminal law should limit itself to, then let's see, what did this person intend to do? What was the actual bad intention that we should go after?